What is the most unorthodox way you know of that a couple has met and fallen in love? I only heard this from a friend, but I find it hilarious. My friend went to a house party with this dude. This dude decided to wear his Pikachu costume to the party, although it wasn't a costume party. Then he met her at the party. She also wears her Pikachu costume. I met them once. They were super funny. They are married. End of story. We knew each other only a little bit through friends. I was badly injured in an industrial accident. I needed time to heal. I lived alone, and it was dangerous for me not to have someone who could check on me periodically. She happened to be recovering from eye surgery and wasn't able to her job or drive for a couple weeks and offered me her guest bedroom until I could safely go home. I think it felt safe for her to make the offer. I was pretty much completely incapacitated and barely ambulatory. We had an amazing 25 years before she died. I'll always love her. My great aunt went to Paris to study art in the 1950s, sunk into a depression, and went out to throw herself into the scene. Along came a Frenchman who was fresh out of the Foreign Legion. He talked her off the bridge, talked his way into her heart pants, and they both moved to Sweden together and lived happily painting together for about 40 years. Fortune teller, the mists are clearing. You are going to meet a handsome stranger. I sense that he is a kind, caring man. The spirits say he has a well-paid job. He installs air conditioning. This sounds a lot like my son. I'll give you his number. They are still together with kids 20 years later, and people think that fortune telling is a scam. My dad was a young Catholic priest, and my mom volunteered at his parish helping bring food and meds, etc. to elderly shut-ins. They met and fell in love. As a direct result of this, my dad was sent by the bishop to Lima, Peru to physically, as in construction work, build a school and do some soul searching. My dad soul searched and helped build a school. He came back and told the bishop that he no longer wanted to be a priest and wanted to marry my mom. The bishop gave them his blessing and personally married them in the cathedral. I am named after the bishop. So my siblings, my mother, and I are all grateful that dad chose us over his marriage to God. Maybe this isn't the best story, but it's the story I've got. Edit for clarity, my dad was encouraged by the bishop to volunteer with Marinol for a period of time. My sister swiped the side of a guy's brand new car. She said he got out of his car, stormed over in a rage, and had a comical change of expression demeanor as soon as he got a look at her. They'd been together for 3 years. Also, I'm too good a driver. That's my problem. My parents, back in the 70s met whilst being pen pals from a certain UK newspaper. My dad was in the forces, and they basically fell in love over the course of writing letters to one another. They got married whilst only having met in person a few times, and the marriage lasted almost 30 years until his death at a relatively young age, 52. I met my husband on a bus tour of Scotland where we got chatting and sparks flew straight away. We had a whirlwind romance over 3 days amongst castles, glens, and icy highland streams. We swam in Loch Ness, drank whiskey, and learned about tartan together before the trip was over and he had to fly home more than 5,000 miles away. Friends and family didn't think it would work, and neither did we. We were in a long-distance relationship between Los Angeles and Edinburgh for nearly 3 years with an over 5,000-mile commute to see each other until we got married. But we agreed at the start we'd stay together until the relationship stopped being fun. We now live together in Scotland with our daughter, and the Skype ringtone still gives me flashbacks. We're still having fun. A guy studied to become a priest, and a girl studied to become a nun. They met, dropped out, and yes, they got married. My cousin was engaged to be married to her high school sweetheart. Everything seemed fine in the relationship, but obviously wasn't given. She went on vacation, met a guy, broke up with her fiance, moved to the vacation spot. They've been married for 30 years, so it seems like she made the right choice, but damn, vacation dudes got mad game. My dad gave my mom a speeding ticket the first time they met. Turns out they were set up by their friends to go on a blind date. It's a good thing my dad was polite to my mom while ticketing her LOL. I moved to a small city in an Asian country at 22. Weirdly, there was a bar owned by a guy who went to the same college as me in the city. The bartender at that bar was a cute Irish guy. I went home with him, we eloped, and I returned to the States with an Irish husband. We've been married 6 years and have a baby boy and 2 dogs. Not necessarily how they met, but how they got together. My grandmother had recently broken up with her boyfriend, and her ex's best friend asked her to hang out for the evening to cheer her up. He'd had polio as a kid and had just spent the previous 2 years in an iron lung. He was tired of being confined and decided to just live out what was left of his life without the lung. His doctors had given him 2 years max. My grandmother felt sorry for him and announced that she'd marry him and spend the little time he had left with him. They married that night. Yes, he really had been given 2 years to live, but he managed to live 50 more. Yes, they stayed married. So I have a mate of mine from work who's a Nepalese immigrant, and I asked him one day why he came to our country. We were talking about another coworker who immigrated more recently. He replied, I could find another job here, but I couldn't find another wife at home because his wife had come to Oz with their child to become a ... nurse, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. And so I asked how he met his wife, and he revealed that when he was in his early 30s, his mother basically went, you should be married, and found him a wife almost immediately. Like from the point she said that to the wedding was 2 weeks, no joke. You hear a lot about arranged marriages going badly, but I've met both his wife and his daughter, and how the couple speaks of each other, you can tell they're madly in love, especially him. Every time he speaks on his wife, even if it's just telling me about something she did at work or what she's cooking that night, his entire body and voice screams of how much he loves his wife. It's honestly super adorable, and I hope their love lasts forever. This sounds made up, and I know that. It's the internet, so take it or leave it. My friend decided she was done trying to find a partner and wanted to start her family, so she started looking into sperm donation. She found this company that allows communication between donors and those looking. This was to allow questions on medical info, etc. The sperm donors obviously have no claim to any child they would have contributed to. Well, she finds this man across the country from her and thinks he's a good fit. She goes through with the donation, gets pregnant, has her baby. Everything is great. Well, turns out she never stopped communicating with the sperm donor, and they actually get along really well. When the baby is around 7 months old, he decides to fly out and meet her and the kid. Well, they fall in love. They knew each other for a year and a half at this point, and it was like they met in person and just clicked. Within 2 years, they've dated, gotten married, and had another child the old-fashioned way. He had to legally adopt the first child that was through the donation. Place I used to work, met my wife there. There was a girl who worked there, sweet, beautiful, the whole package, was set up on a blind date. A photo shoot ran late, so she called the guy back, apologized profusely, told him she'd meet him at the restaurant. The guy laughed and said, I think you have a wrong number, but he thought she sounded cute, so he asked her out. Turns out he's the head of neurosurgery at a large local hospital group. About 6 months later, he was offered a position in NYC, and she was moving there with him. Same place, one of the artists and her bestie went on a double date arranged by a very early dating site. They had fun, but after the date, the girls got talking and found that neither felt much connection to their own date, but both preferred the other girl's date. The artist married her friend's date, and the friend was engaged to the artist's date, last I heard. My grandparents grew up in refugee camps after WWII, and then in 1950, both of their remaining families got the chance to board a boat, not knowing at the time if they were headed to Canada or Venezuela. They met on the boat and became friends for the duration of the journey. They then landed in Canada and went their separate ways. A couple years later, my Oma received a phone call out of the blue from my OPA, who had spent months tracking her down through the German refugees spread out in Ontario. And he invited my Oma, her sister, and their parents to join him where he was living because there was lots of work on the tobacco farms. So they went, they reunited, fell in love, and were married in 1954. It'll be their 70-year anniversary this year. My parents have been married for 42 years this year. And my dad proposed after only 6 weeks. He wanted to propose after 2 weeks, but my Nana convinced him to wait at least 6. Because that's how long my papa waited before proposing to her. Thank you for listening. Please like and share the video with a friend, and I am planning to make more videos like this. In the comments, tell me what stories I should talk about next.